they take on Halimi. One should not take lightly what's happening in England. But they are no longer kind of like attacks on Jews with impunity. They are not attacks which are sanctioned, most in cases, from above, rather condemned. When the Prime Minister of France said, if you leave the Jews, France will collapse, he means it. Even in England. I'm not saying you don't have a big issue here. I don't know how many people from England are here because most people here coming from different places. But even in England, people understand. And Theresa May expressed herself in no uncertain terms. And so David Cameron in the past and other members of the Labour who just left. You cannot sanction this. And if you do, and you see for the first time the Jewish Chronicle and all the papers here united and saying we are in dangers in England. And indeed, British Jews have been leaving and are thinking about leaving. But there is no imminent danger. And indeed, Israel also, one you have to understand, Israel took upon itself, I don't know if you know it or not, Israel took upon itself as a matter of law. Chapter 13 in the Israeli Penal Code declares, and this is the quote, and if I remember it correctly, if not, you excuse me, but more or less, that Israel is responsible for the well-being of Jew wherever she may be, if they are attacked as Jews. Extrajudicial law. You cannot attack a Jew because he's Jewish and think that Israel will not get back to you. Interesting. So Israel is sending whatever it is, I don't know if you know it, but it's not a secret anymore. It's sending its Mossad operators, whatever it is, to defend synagogues and other places if they are being attacked. Don't think that we will sit in a sovereign state of Israel and think the Jews were attacked because they're Jewish. We have a responsibility. We are the Jewish state. Interesting. It doesn't mean they can defend the Jews wherever they are because they are still citizens of America, citizens of England, but nevertheless they have a claim like that. Other countries have taken same claims about their own diasporas. When Korean Americans were attacked in 1992 in the LA riots, remember that? Korea said, we're going to come and defend you. Kim Do-young, sort of like at the time, yes. There's like a question, what is your responsibility? Is that your extended family? Is the Jews an extended family or they are related just by chance? A big question that's being asked. The fact is also that as a result of anti-Semitism, many French Jews also left, started to come to Israel. They created what they call Boeing Aliyah. One step in Netanya in Tel Aviv, the other in Toulouse. They come back and forth. Some people said this is the reason why real estate is so expensive in Israel. Because everybody buying for the sake of maybe I will need it as a safe haven. In the case of the United States, which is the largest case, of course, Jews always stressed that America is different because America basically wiped out anti-Semitism. In any case, America had other difficult challenges. Above all, racism. The condition of African American was much harsher in America than of Jews, of course. Of slavery, the legacy of slavery, the legacy of racism, so embedded in the legacy of the United States. Therefore, there is a tragedy of sorts whenever there is kind of a debate between African American and Jewish American on this issue rather than unity. And this issue is becoming more and more intense in the case of the internal debate in America if people don't understand the context, how it's being used and misused. It is not by mistake that you see on campuses around the United States that BDS activists, boycott, divestment, sanction activists, trying to separate Jewish Americans from African Americans in the sense of sort of creating a rift. As if you are sort of like supporting Israel, you cannot be friends of the progressive wing, which is of course ridiculous because look at who is the progressive wing in America. American Jews, remember, on vast elections, 80% vote for Democrats. They are 80% liberals. The American left, to begin with, was always Jewish. What is left in America if not Jewish? What is left in America if not Jewish? From the time they came, all the left came, all the Bund and what is known in the past, the American left in the working force, and Lazarus, etc. It all came from from Russia. They were the progressive voices. What do you think is Bernie Sanders? And yet, the language there is becoming intense and viral. And one has to keep in mind that this is becoming, it's manipulated in my opinion, without going into discussion of a serious discussion on issues. And the reason is because there's such enmity in America between the forces of the right and forces of the left, so the Jews are interjected in between. It's very easy on the left to hate the Jew who is supposedly related to Israel, who is supported by Trump, than rather to hate Trump directly. You hate Trump directly also, but it's easy to say, it's the Jewish voices. And vice versa. It's very easy to hate the Jews on the right, or the liberal Jews, because they supposedly debunk Trump rather than deal with other issues. And in between, you have new alliances. Evangelicals, Friends of Israel, others, and so on. The context have to be understood. So in any case, the Jews are being injected or interjected, or whatever you want to say, into this kind of debate. And anti-Semitism is sometime on the rise. And when you have violent attack, it's kind of exploding. In any context, if you look at last week, sort of like development, when Congresswoman, what's her name? Omar or the other lady? Yes. So when she articulates this kind of like issues against Israel and against the power of Israel on the Hill and so on, liberal Jews are on the defensive. What do you mean? How can we dare? If they will say something about her, they're racists. So they have to be, but how she could speak about us like that? And then Trump intervenes, and Trump understands the game. So they have to defend her and be against her for what she says about them. And she can build herself like that beautifully. Politics. The politics of otherness is certainly interjecting Jews into it, and anti-Semitism is constantly there. And why is it? It's because notwithstanding their positions in the countries of domicile, the big issue of the Jews was always whether they can claim the place of citizenship, their real home, I argue. In Israel, everybody claims home. It is my home. When you fly in El Al in Israel, the big commercial is, Achi babayit ba'olam. This is the greatest place of home you travel. You'll be a black Jew, white Jew, Sephardic Jew, everybody claims home. And they fight in the streets of Israel tooth and nail for the place in the home. French Jews suddenly wake up and say, wow, we have been here generations. Vlan said it's our home. But how come others suddenly start to challenge it's our home? To the point that even American Jews, you can start to challenge whether it's their home, and they feel outraged by it. Challenging the fact that Jews have a home in other countries is absolutely anti-Semitic. It's basically making the case that they do not have a home here. This always have been the case in Eastern Europe. Still, no Eastern European country look at Jews as if it's their home. French Jews don't think that this is their home because the French tell them it's not. When the Israeli ambassador is brought, and I was there to meet Jewish French Jews, Israel ambassador, the mayor of the place say, I brought you your ambassador. So what do you mean your ambassador? He's the ambassador of Israel. We are French. We live in Toulouse. When I'm in Argentina, and you have an event of Jewish Argentines, and there is like an event, they said, the Israeli, your ambassador, means that you're Argentines. You serve in Israel, but you are, sometimes maybe you do not belong. Israel is becoming sort of like the essence of kind of like the test, even though by definition they kind of challenge their homeness. This is one of the biggest challenges of diaspora Jews today. Whether they can claim home without being challenged that this is their home, in my opinion. This is the new anti-Semitism that relates to Israel, but relates also to the idea of your claim of home that is in the Western world. What was perceived to be a fait accompli, something which was settled, as if there is no question about it. Apparently there is a question, and that makes the claim of Zionism even stronger, because say, we told you so. Obviously in Russia they already moved, in Ukraine they are moving, in all the Arab countries they are moving, in South Africa they are moving. How could they claim home if people challenge that this is their home? So to make yourself a home, you have basically assimilate and hide your Jewishness. If you hide your Jewishness, an anti-Semitism doesn't catch you. Unless eventually it will become racism again, and that will catch you again. But that is not the intention of multiculturalism in the liberal state. Liberal state and multiculturalism was supposed to celebrate your identity, was supposed to accentuate your identity. You want to be community. You want to see, I don't have to apologize for it. On the contrary, this is my home, and my home is pluralists. Who invented the very idea of America as a pluralist nation? Horace Kellen, a Jewish thinker. El pluribus unum, out of many one, the legacy of the United States. When you think about minorities, and we think about racism, therefore, think about the Jewish case as an exemplar, as a case to be reckoned with. Today, there are about 7 million Jews around the world outside of the state of Israel, maybe 7.5 million, depends how you count. There is a battle out there for making themselves feel comfortable, for feeling that this is their home. The state of Israel sometimes is not sensitive enough to their condition, because out of the conceptual understanding that Israel is the home, they don't pay attention when these Jews are attacked by saying, wow, this is not a right. But sometimes say, I told you so, so come here. I'm telling you, this is the mentalite. Especially if these Jews are too liberal and kind of like thinking kumbaya society and everything is so Israel, Israeli nationalists are always pointing, didn't we tell you it's about time to move? Triumphant stupidity of the Israelis. At the same time, there is triumphant timidity of diaspora Jews who, when attacked because of Israel, take a step back rather than take a very active action to debunk that. They are too much apologetic. Whenever Israel is now, what we have in Gaza, we have to apologize. No. You have to do certain things with reality check. And reality check means that you don't apologize, you look at issues, you debate, you're part of the voice of the Jewish people. And for observers from the outside who claim to defend rights of others, be it African American, be it Hispanic, be it Indian, whatever they have really to understand whenever there is kind of an attack of the Jews because of home or because of affinity, they are the next target, undoubtedly. You cannot think that you can compromise the Jewish voices while asking that yours will be heard. It doesn't work. I've been studying Arab Americans, I wrote a monograph about them. I've been studying Indian Americans. I've been studying African Americans' relation with the Jews. I wrote books, you can read them. I don't want you to read so much because you will be confused more. But it's clear to me that this is a big cue. It's a big testing sort of case to be examining of anti-Semitism. Let me conclude by saying we have come a long way from ancient Judaism, which was a tribe, and a nation which became dispersed. And its dispersion was seen as a curse, and to some as a blessing of universalism and halachic life. Many people thought that living without sovereignty brings prosperity and cultural growth and even innovation. As Dubnov, who I mentioned, wrote, the Jews are the quintessential diasporic nation. They bring light into the nations because they bring new morality. Morality that doesn't need power. That's what they wrote about. In the era of globalization, the era of borderless people, the Jews were supposed to be the quintessential example how you can prosper and be agile. Yuri Sleskin wrote in his book, The Jewish Century, that the Jews of the United States are the greatest achievement of modernity. They are the most flexible, they are the most innovative, and they are the most creative people in the world, and therefore the most successful. I maintain that only because sovereignty and the place of home, you can become agile, flexible, and successful. It is not by mistake that the startup nation begins in Tel Aviv, that Israelis travel the world and become prosperous all over the world, and travel and see themselves as universal, and still claim home and be certain about it without being so susceptible to anti-Semitism. They fight it. They speak about it. It doesn't mean that you have to have all the Jews in the sovereign state of Israel. Not, I didn't say that. But once you have a duality of a diaspora people and a sovereign people, understanding that people who then include both sovereignty and dispersion, and you still have a claim of home, that kind of empowers you against any charges of otherness and any charges that bring malign kind of like designation of you, including, of course, hurting you violently. In that respect, I think we have come full circle. We have come a long way. And not to say that we don't have to be concerned about what's happening in the world, and I'm concerned always, because as a Jewish trait you have to be concerned, otherwise you are not Jewish. But I think you also have to think how successful this era has been of creating a strong sovereignty and creating a reality check and also speaking up your mind. When the Holocaust took place, American Jews stayed on the sidelines. Wyman wrote the book, The Abandonment of the Jews. Anyone has to read it. How they were afraid that they will speak about their brothers and sisters being exterminated in gas chambers in Europe. They may be stigmatized in America for taking America into places America shouldn't want to be because America fights its own wars. The Israeli creed is never again. It's a creed that says not arrogance of power, but realization that if you want to be really alert to such hate, you have to be ready also to react. If you are attacked, you have to have the ammunition to understand where it comes from. You have to answer intellectually. You have to respond aggressively. And I think this is where the struggle for anti-Semitism should be today. Thank you so much for listening. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. I found it very interesting the way you brought up kind of the fine line of Jews in the diaspora recognizing Israel as another home, but also kind of getting stigmatized as not necessarily being part of the nation in which they dwell. So my question, I'm kind of curious how you think that reflects some of the early, like Eastern Haskalah or cultural Zionist.
Sorry, I kind of, maybe, yeah.
I'm just curious how you think that affects kind of, or reflects kind of the vision that a lot of Eastern Haskalah and cultural Zionists, like Achad Ha'am, had the vision of kind of a cultural center where
Yes.
Jews from the diaspora would be able to kind of relate their Judaism.
Brilliant question. What's your name?
Noah.
Noah asked a question. I don't know if everybody knows what you're talking about, but I'll try to simplify it. Noah was asking me about this transformation that the Jews underwent from the time of the 18th century. To what extent they are a religious tribe or members of the modern state. Beginning with Mendelssohn. Mendelssohn was the first one who was contended with this question in the concept of Germany and Immanuel Kant. To what extent you can retain Jewish orthodoxy as a tribal and not being integrated into the Western society. The Jews have basically moved into integration into Western society. And this was their creed, integration. And yet, the question was, how do we maintain it? In the late 19th century, when pogroms in Russia and Zionism started to move, there was two alternative responses. The one is the major response, America. The other was Zionism trickles into Palestine. There were those who thought, including Echad Ha'am, that we are not ready for a sovereign state because we will not be able to create it. But what is important for us is to maintain cultural Judaism in a sovereign place. Otherwise, we will be assimilated in a liberal state. And he supported it. He even supported it with intellectuals who created Hebrew University. The architect of Hebrew University, Brit Shalom, said, we will create autonomous Jewish, with the Arabs, no one will attack us because we will do it. This, of course, was proven wrong. Not was proven wrong theoretically, but actually the Arab attacks with vengeance did not accept any Jew in Palestine, wanted to wipe them out. So cultural Zionism became a theory, but in reality, actual Zionism or pragmatic Zionism of Ben-Gurion was the issue. How do we secure our life? In today's world, people still ask this question of the past. To what extent Jewish culture supposed to be the one that informs Israel, or sovereignty and power is the number one issue? De facto, you're absolutely correct. Israelis don't ask questions about Judaism. They know nothing about it mostly. They go to the beach on holidays. They celebrate as civic religion the holidays. They have vacation on Passover and Rosh Hashanah, but they know a little bit. And the big question about Israel is who controls the culture? The ultra-Orthodox, the religious Zionists, the secularists. How do you create this amalgamation of cultures between particularist culture of nationalism, religion, or universalism? The fact that Tel Aviv is the largest gay parade in the world, they say, is nemesis to the ultra-Orthodox, right? How do you reconcile it? This is part and parcel of what we call the Israeli Kulturkampf, the culture war inside Israel. But this is for another lecture, and Charles pays very little about these lectures. Charles, don't take it personally. Yes. Yes, sir.
So actually in America right now, there's some interesting surveys that show that political affiliation is actually more powerful than racial animus. So that there are more people who say, I do not want my son or daughter to marry someone from the other party, and say, I don't want my son or daughter to marry someone across a racial or colored line.
Yes.
And so I think belonging in America right now is belonging to a political ideology. I think that America is so divided right now to belong to something. And what I'm seeing is that for young American Jews, in order for them to gain citizenship within the progressive country, this progressive subcountry of the United States, they're allowed to be Jews. They're allowed to be religious Jews. They're allowed to be identified Jews, but they have to renounce Israel in order to get citizenship. That's the cost.
Look, it's a tragedy. But it also speaks about, ask yourself, okay, you renounce Israel and you become a progressive Jew, but you already renounced religion, because to be progressive you have to renounce religion. And when you're progressive, you also renounce your community because you have a universal community. Basically, you dissipate. So if you want to dissipate, the Israelis say, dissipate. And then the debate goes on that Israelis, including our Minister of Education, said, go to hell. In a different fashion, he says it. But basically, if you don't like us, if you think that in order to be Jewish you have to hate us, so be a Jewish anti-Semite, but don't come for my help. This is terrible if there is like that. This language, I think, is poisonous, is toxic on all sides. One has to take a step back and understand who is manipulating it, what needs to be done. There's lots of work to be done, because the Jews, regardless of what you think about them, as there are many things to think about them, have survived 2,500, 3,000 years of life, more. I don't want to go to Jewish calendars right now, right? And there is something which is America celebrating, which is identity. To tell the Jews that only you cannot celebrate your identity is absolutely anti-Semitic in my opinion. But you have to hold your ground. And how you hold your ground is basically first identify what does it mean to be Jewish for you. So many American Jews come on birthright Israel to Israel. They come for 2 weeks tour in Israel as a silver bullet for Jewish identity. Suddenly they open their hearts and minds and say, wow, I have brothers and sisters here. It's not brothers and sisters that debunk my citizenship in America. But so are Latin American, so are African Americans who travel to South Africa and celebrate this kind of like, this achievement. It is part of America, what we call to achieve, to celebrate the achievement of your people across frontiers. It doesn't mean that it comes at the expense of America. The demand of the Jews to do so, to celebrate, I think it's absolutely outrageous. Again, I don't want to send you to read books, but I wrote the book Marketing the American Creed Abroad, how Americans relate to their countries of origin and diasporas. And I think this is a very, very, very alarming development. Now, it also relates, as you say, to politics in America. The Jews have moved away from what they call particularism, not the Jews, certain Jews, many Jews not, and into what they call tikkun olam. What's tikkun olam? Mending the world. Mending the world is universal creed. Obama was also saying, I'm doing tikkun olam. The big question is, when you do tikkun olam, does it have to be tikkun olam that has nothing to do with Jews, but it's a Jewish concept? It's kind of like even it's Shabtai, doesn't matter. It's a concept that the Reform debunk once, but it's a kind of like a beautiful idea of mending the world, universalism. How much universal you can be and be also a member of people. African Americans want to be African Americans for good reason. Spanish Americans don't want to give their identity. Irish still celebrate Irish identity. It may be the case that the Jewish American, many of whom, not all, many of whom say, okay, it's enough for me, and they will assimilate. It happened. 70% of American Jews in any case marry intermarriages. I'm not criticizing. It's their way of life. You know, I come from a family like that, so I understand it. But it's a choice. Being a member of a certain people, it's a choice. And America allows you this choice, whether you want to belong or you don't want to belong. As long as it's not being imposed on you to say, I cannot belong because if I belong to something which is unallowed. I think this is problematic. Yes, sir. 5 minutes? Okay, yeah. I thought you were asking a question. Okay. We don't have to exhaust the whole 5 if you don't have questions. Any questions? Okay, so I say thank you.